Moorish Spain is a symbol of harmony between religious communities. Under enlightened Umayyad rule, Muslims, Christians, and Jews coexisted peacefully. In the shadow of the mosque and the church, in the narrow streets of the Jewish neighborhood, a new light was about to shine. Moses Maimonides rose like a star in the firmament of the golden age of Andalusia. Born in Córdoba in 1135, he became the most highly revered intellectual of medieval Spanish Judaism. His works, including the Guide for the Perplexed, have taken on great importance in the eyes of all scholars, Jewish, Muslim, and Christian. His code of law, the Mishneh Torah, was a major influence on the writings of philosophers from every school of thought, as well as religious erudites from every creed for generations.
Of his Mishneh Torah, Maimonides said, "He who reads my book will know everything of the Torah and its commentaries."
Rashi in France, Maimonides in Spain were both inspired by a vision of universalism. Both of them wanted to take the wisdom of the Talmud out of the confines of the synagogue and make it available to all. However, whereas Rashi concentrated on clarifying the method, Maimonides chose to ignore it, emphasizing the conclusions of the ancient sages instead. This yielded a practical Talmud.
My goal is to be as concise as I am complete, Maimonides wrote, so that the reader can be steered directly to all that has been instituted and confirmed by the Talmud, without dealing with all the discussions of the sages which may trouble his reasoning. I am doing all this so that my book will be the only book a person needs.
An astronomer, mathematician, and botanist, royal physician to Saladin, Maimonides devoted his life to imparting wisdom to the people of his time, great and humble. His genius revealed the universal nature of the knowledge in the Talmud. He is buried in Tiberias, where the Talmud itself was born. Thus, Maimonides is reunited with his illustrious forebears. It was not until the early 13th century that the Christian armies rallied their strength to reconquer Spain and drive out the Moors. Spain's unification was the result of the marriage of Isabella the Catholic and Ferdinand of Aragon in 1474. In January 1492, the religious cleansing began and Muslims were banned from residing in the land. Caught in the torment of the Inquisition, which the Vatican had revived, the Jews were driven out of Spain the same year. They fled, saving their only true wealth, the Talmud, from the disaster. Unwelcome in Spain, the Jews and their Talmud sought homes elsewhere. Venice offered them its hospitality.
Why did God disperse his people all over the world? The student asked. So that the light of his Torah could illuminate every dark corner, the sage replied. And for bringing light, Jews are hated, persecuted, and driven out? The student retorted. The greater the light, the more painful is its birth, replied the sage, his eyes filled with tears.
Although the Doge of Venice was relatively independent of the Roman Church, the first ghetto in history was located in Venice in the late 15th century. Ghetto, a Venetian word, came from the Italian verb gettare. It was where the foundries discarded their scrap metal. The Doge of Venice gave the Jews permission to settle there. Venice began to produce its own crop of Talmudic scholars. Venice is a landmark city in the Talmud's history, for it was here that the full text of the Talmud was printed for the first time. The year was 1519, 5279 according to the Hebrew calendar. The Vatican, which had made the presence of the Talmud in Italy punishable by the rigors of the Inquisition, had no power over the Doge, who allowed Jewish books to be printed on his territory. Page after page of the Hebrew script was printed on the presses of Daniel Bomberg. It was one of the most colossal undertakings in the history of printing. It amounted to nearly 10,000 pages, which were carefully proofread by prominent Jewish scholars, aware that the book they were producing was unique, as vital as it was miraculous. It took 5 years of devotion, from 1519 to 1523, for the Talmud manuscript to become a printed document. Bomberg spared no expense in his effort to ensure that his edition of the Talmud would be perfect, and he succeeded. The Bomberg Talmud remained the single exact reference for nearly 4 centuries. All of the printings which followed, the most famous among them being Basel, Pizarro, Amsterdam, Munich, Frankfurt, and Krakow, up until the definitive 19th century Vilna edition, were based on Bomberg's work. Bomberg's painstaking typesetting work became the gold standard for the layout of the pages of the Talmud in the era of the printing press. As a result, its appearance is sober, simple, and classical, devoid of flourishes, going straight to the heart of the text according to a special geometry. The Bomberg edition settled the page layout. The text of the Mishnah and Gemara are printed in the center of each page in square characters, while the commentaries by Rashi and his students are visible in the margins in semi-cursive script. In the 16th century, with Bomberg, the Talmud became a work of art. Nevertheless, creeping censorship by the Vatican forced Bomberg to close his printing business and leave Venice in 1546. The Church, which could not criticize the Bible without criticizing itself, made the Talmud the target of its hostility. In the eyes of Rome, the Jews were no longer the people of the Bible, but the people of the Talmud, teachings damned as anti-Christian and diabolical. The Church's arguments against the Talmud and its contents were groundless, of course. The Talmud sternly condemns idolatrous religions, but never designates Christianity as one of them. Yet, the Church was determined to prove Jewish perfidy. In the second half of the 16th century, the Church, committed to the Counter-Reformation and embattled by the liberalism of the Renaissance, required strict observation of the faith. It engaged in active persecution of the Jewish community, accusing it of anti-Christian sentiments. Many monasteries still possess copies of Jewish books confiscated at the time. The Church has always been wary of Jewish books. However, the Vatican scholars, unable to read Hebrew or interpret the text, soon decided to escalate